Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Becoming More Me. Super excited to introduce you to my guest this week. His name is Alexander Ohm, and he is one of my personal coaches, part of this soulful sales company. He is a storyteller, a community leader, a coach of consciousness and business. And he's really good at helping people to remember their own purpose and to bring their gifts to life in a tangible way that helps us all heal and evolve. Now, over the past 10 years, he has directly helped over 500 entrepreneurs grow and expand through his own private practice coaching by hosting epic retreats. He's a great retreat planner, and as a partner in the Soulful Sales Company, which we'll talk about more on this episode. He's bringing his own message to life as a writer, photographer, and speaker, and he believes that everyone is here on purpose and that by approaching our life through the lens of consciousness, we can remember our divine wisdom, heal at a deep level, and create true miracles in our lives and businesses here and now. So this conversation is going to go in a lot of different directions. There is amazing practical business advice that will help you connect in community. We are going to explore the scale of consciousness, which we also explored a few episodes ago here in that upper limits and the dance of fear and desire. And we're going to talk about the energetics of entrepreneurship. So stay tuned. It all starts now. Welcome, Alexander. Thanks for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me, Teresa. I am ecstatic to have the chance to talk to you more. One of my favorite people that I get to talk to on a regular basis,
Aw.
and probably one of the people that I reference the most as well to others when I'm talking about the subconscious, and finding success in business, blending the energetic realms and the entrepreneurial realms. So yeah, it's an honor.
Oh, same here. Right back at you for sure. I always love to kind of open this up with asking you a little bit about, who you are outside of the business world, what your day-to-day life is like, the people you like to surround yourself with, hobbies, that sort of thing. Can you kind of give us a little lens into who you are in that way?
Absolutely. So married, have a beautiful wife named Grace, and we have a really cool journey together. So it's been almost 4 years, and just like a really like cool set of synchronicities that led us together. And ever since we met, it's been full force. And people talk about having a spiritual awakening. And maybe I thought I had mine when I was, in my early 20s. But when Grace and I got together, it was a whole other level of, craziness going on, which we could, literally probably do a whole podcast about in itself. But it's been
I always
really,
love relationship synchronicities and all those kind of like magical things. So, wherever it goes.
yeah, I mean, I'm open to it. But you know, when we got together, not only was there a lot of really cool shifts that happened in my life, but also a lot of really deep healing that started to take place.
Mm.
And so, to talk about the personal side of things, a little bit about my background is my mother passed away when I was 9, almost 10 years old, and that from, let's say, 10 years old to 30 years old, it was kind of just like, oh well, that's that kind of sucks, but life is life, and whatever the case may be. And you know, through a series of deep practices, kind of ceremonial experiences, work with grace, and actually a particular book. It's called The Smell of Rain on Dust, which I highly recommend to anyone who's experienced loss or is working through grief. But through that work in particular, I started to actually be able to grieve as an adult. And anyway, so that's kind of our day-to-day life oftentimes looks like, quote unquote, doing the work, or some sort of magic occurring. And part of that magic is definitely our daughter, Love. So she's just over a year old. And yeah, I would say, outside of spending time with my wife and my daughter, one of the most important um, North Stars that we're following is building really strong, intimate community. that can not only support each other, in the day to day in the short term, but as we look forward into the world and the instability or the uncertainty, it gives us a place to move towards where maybe we'll eventually have land, where we're doing some biodynamic farming and gathering people. So we're starting to try and live that way today, where we're having, community dinners at our house. And, every other week there's a men's group that I go to and a women's circle that Grace goes to. And so community in person is very important to us. And then community digitally or online is very important to me because I see how that plays into creating change at scale. So that's where my personal life starts to blend into the, professional life, so to speak, even though they feel very similar to me. And yeah, outside of that, if someone heard me talking about business and doing this deep inner work, they might be surprised to know that if I wasn't doing that stuff, I'd be, playing around with my camera, kind of like a part-time amateur photographer. And I grew up in the outdoors. So my dad pretty much had me fishing before I was walking. And I just, yeah, absolutely. If I can get out into the outdoors, that's like my ultimate, that's my church. That's my spiritual practice.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Where
that's a
did you
bit
grow
about
up?
in Ontario. So in Canada, people call that on the East Coast, but that's not actually the East Coast of Canada. But yeah, I grew up in Ontario in the Niagara region. So, really, really beautiful. There was a lot of, greenery, forest. They call it the green belt there. A lot
Mhm.
of like farming and wineries. And I went to university there. And then after that, I moved to Toronto. And I got a fancy job, fancy title, worked my way up the ladder pretty quickly, and yeah, didn't find a lot of fulfillment or meaning or happiness in that. There was great moments for sure, but that led me to start traveling. So that was my first solo trip where I went to India, and then I never really considered settling back down in Ontario after that, and made the move to British Columbia on the west coast of Canada about 8 years ago.
Okay. And then I guess when I first met you, you were in Mexico.
Yes. Yeah. So
So,
lived in Mexico in between that. And yeah, I've done little shorter stints in other places as well. 3 or 4 months in Australia, a couple months in Bali, a couple months in Europe. So yeah, lots of travel. And I think that's the blessing of being able to work online in some capacities. And yeah, so, but I would say the home base is British Columbia, at least for now. And Mexico does feel like a second home.
yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for all of that background. I'm learning things about you that I've never learned before either. And for anybody who doesn't know, like I see Alexander on a weekly basis, sometimes multiple times a week. He is like one of my mentors and coaches. And, I enjoy, his presence as much as he's saying he enjoys mine too. So it's a mutual thing and it's really awesome. And I know that one of the things that we wanted to kind of get into today was the energetics of entrepreneurship. And the container that you and Dan have at Soulful Sales that I've been a part of now for over a year and a half has definitely helped with my energetics of entrepreneurship. So what does that like mean to you and how do you convey that when you're talking about that?
Yeah, great question. So the way that I see the world is that it's, energy first and, matter second. We don't have to get too metaphysical about this, but the easiest way to think about it is mostly we feel something and then we do something about it. Right. So if someone was super angry, they would feel angry first and then they would throw the book across the room. And a lot of people, when they're trying to work on their business, they're looking at the book on the floor, saying like, okay, well, I just got to pick it up. Right. And gotta fix this in my business, pick the book up off the floor. And the next week it's on the floor again. And they're like, oh, okay, well, I'll take a course on how to get books off the floor. Or maybe I'll buy a bookshelf and it'll help me organize it more. Or maybe I'll join a group that helps people get books off the floor. And all the while, they've never looked internally at that energy that's making them frustrated or angry. So a lot of people in the health space can talk about root cause approach with like
Mhm.
functional medicine. And for me, energetics in entrepreneurship is kind of like a root cause approach. So if you're not getting the clients that you want or the exposure that you want, whatever the case may be, let's look at the inner energy. And when we make changes there, there's really beautiful materialistic changes that can happen quite quickly. And if we want to reference, A Course in Miracles, every day, every action can be miraculous. It could seem that way, where a client seems to come out of nowhere, or an amount of debt is just wiped out, just because of a really intense journaling session or a realization in a meditation.
Yeah. I mean, you helped me kind of shed light on this the other day. And I love that, I think I said this last week when I sent you and Dan something, that you guys are kind of like loving mirrors of like, I always feel like you kind of like reflect back like what I need to see or take a look at, and then I do it. So yesterday we had our coaching call and we were talking about bringing more like fun, like bringing fun Teresa back into the picture. And not like she's ever like gone, but she was feeling a little bit deflated the other day. And this morning I did something that I told myself I wasn't going to do until like I had done all of these like kind of rigid steps. And I did this piece of artwork that is now sitting behind me. If you're watching the video version of the podcast, you can see it. And it was intended to kind of like rewire the neurons in my brain around some of the resistance and stuff that I had going on. And it was a heck of a lot of fun to do. So, I got up early, like before the sun rose, and I did this thing, and it felt like a lot of fun. It was great. It was immersive. I documented it. I can share it. I'm like having conversations about it. It definitely like lit up what was feeling a little bit muted and subdued the other day. And that just kind of like really helped me to change my energy and to, see that energetics of entrepreneurship in action in my today.
Yeah, and such a beautiful example of what most people don't do is they might have these realizations, or someone might reflect something back to them. They say, okay, I'll take that into consideration. Where if we look at Teresa, we bring up something and the next day she's doing it. Not only the next day, but before the sun comes up. And it's like that rapid, and, it reminds me of the work that you do in the subconscious, right? Where it's just like it can happen that quickly. And those are the people that I want to surround myself with, but also the most successful people I come across are those that like, okay, yeah, it might be uncomfortable, right? Usually when we have something reflected to us or we have a realization, there might be an uncomfortability of like, oh, okay, I'll look at that, or and so kudos to you for taking this rapid action.
Oh, thanks. Well, here was the cooler thing was that while I was doing it, like 3 different messages came in while I was doing it that I saw afterwards about people that wanted to do work with me in different capacities or like have me as a guest on their show or like all these different things that like I was having some resistance around. And then another really awesome message of that capacity came through after I did it. But the weird thing was is that it was sent last night. And even though I had checked the platform where I received the message when I got up this morning, it wasn't there. But then like the messages came through after I did the work.
Miracles.
So yeah, so I mean, it was feeling very aligned, and I could really like kind of like feel the things that were changing as I created like that graphic, and I love doing that technique with clients too, and it kind of like brought it up to me again, like I need to do that more, like I need to do like another workshop on like how to rewire neurons through drawing and all that kind of stuff that I love. So thank you for that.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thank you for being willing and open. And I think that you bring up a good part that we referenced yesterday, which is these different parts of us. And so, I'm not a therapist, but I could reference the idea of parts therapy,
Mhm.
where there is a part of Teresa that's really, like fun and playful. And that version of Teresa doesn't like to be chained down and do boring things.
Nope.
Fair enough to her. Yeah. And then there's a part of Teresa that could maybe be more like sensual or like works from her state of pleasure. And
Mhm.
so I think that's another big aspect of looking at the energetics of entrepreneurship is, what are the characters that you're working with? What are the different energetic states that are within you that are all, putting their hand up saying, hey, I want to do this, I want to do that. And most people get stuck in one energetic state or part of themselves, which is usually like the spreadsheet checker, the serious, like, I got to get this done, deadlines, calendar notifications, which we totally need
That's
that
like
part.
my
Like,
yeah, my super serious, like masculine side is like crunching the numbers
yeah,
and like trying to drive everything home, you know?
yeah. And we desperately need those parts of ourselves that we could think about them like the inner manager.
Hmm.
But
No
when I
bad
think of,
parts. I mean, that's the name of the book of I can't think of the author. That had all the parts therapy. No bad parts.
yeah,
There's no bad ones.
there's no bad ones. And at the same time, whether we're hanging out with someone as a friend, as a client, as a collaborator, as a partner, and they're just showing up with this one part, eventually we are going to start to ask of them different parts, because we love all of them. And I think our clients will do that subtly, where maybe people stop reaching out as much. And we're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I'm not getting as much interest. And for me, that's just a signal like, oh yeah, the audience, people, the public, prospects, they're asking to see your other parts again, the playful part or, the sensual part, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden everyone shows up again.
Yeah, no, I love it. Absolutely. It was Richard Schwartz, Dr. Richard Schwartz,
Yes.
I was thinking of that wrote that book. Just for anybody who's looking to look into parts work more, it's a great book. Yeah, and we do need all of those parts, and they all have something important to tell us. They're all there for a reason, and I love doing that kind of work subconsciously. I do a lot of parts work through hypnotherapy, so I totally resonate with all of that. And I know that the scale of consciousness is another area that we like to jam on, and I'd love to kind of get into that too. I know a few weeks ago. I guess it was maybe November or December actually. I had a whole episode on the podcast about like this kind of dance that we do between like fear and desire and upper limits and things like that. So I'd love to kind of get your take on, Hawkins' kind of scale of consciousness and how you see that having an effect or how we can play with it for entrepreneurship and business.
Yeah, I think, if someone hasn't read the book, Power versus Force, I would definitely go and check it out. It is a little bit of like a heavier read.
I have read
Maybe
it, but I will say I'm an Audible book reader, and he should not have read his own book. It's the narration is like it's really awful and it's very hard to listen to. So I do better with the book, which is saying a lot because I listen to everything. But it is powerful, powerful stuff.
Yeah, I've I've read it on my Kindle, and it's funny that you mentioned that because at the end of Power versus Force, he does a little bit of a autobiography, and the author has since passed away. But he talked about how he had this very early on realization in his life about, the divine, and like at 3 years old. So I wasn't doing that at 3 years old, but if a person has that type of mystical experience when they're three, I'm assuming they become a pretty interesting character. And as he outlined in his story, for a lot of his life, he was just kind of this hollow, spirit-filled experience where there was nothing wrong and everything was perfect, and that's great and fantastic. But when we're in that state, a lot of times the personality or maybe the ego structures, those kind of just dissipate and would probably make for like a pretty boring reading of an audiobook. So I'm curious to actually hear what he sounds like now and that. But if someone hasn't read that book, it's easily in my top five of most powerful books or concepts. And he wrote another book which is all about letting go. So it's called Letting Go.
Mhm.
And very similar to Michael Singer's concepts.
Untethered,
Yeah,
kind of
the
stuff.
the surrender experiment,
Yeah,
which
that one.
is,
Yep.
all about letting go. And why I love that's Hawking's work and the scale of consciousness is because it gives us a roadmap to navigate our daily life. And not only our daily life, but as an entrepreneur, it gives us a place to navigate conversations with employees or with customers or whatever the case may be. And, if someone went deep into certain psychologies, like, let's say Jungian psychology, they might have a couple little stickler points about this because a lot of his work is about ascending the scale of consciousness. And some people might argue that there's equal value to descending.
Sure.
You know,
It's kind of like the no bad parts concept. There's no bad feelings or emotions.
Yes.
And we are
Yeah,
always seeming to want to raise the vibration, raise the feeling, but sometimes we really need what those lower vibrations and those lower feelings bring us. And without contrast, what would any of it be worth anyway?
absolutely. So in this like human 3D experience, we need the full range. But I think what's valuable about the scale is most people don't realize that they're stuck in the lower range. And in the book, he would call that the survival paradigm. So most people live in survival state, and you would know this by working with their nervous system with hypnotherapy. And when they finally calm down, some really beautiful magical things can occur. And so I use the scale of consciousness on a day-to-day basis. And two things are required. One is an awareness, right? So meditation practice, breathing practices, time in nature, you have to develop some level of awareness of what your current state is.
Hmm.
So if someone hasn't figured that out yet, probably doing some work with Teresa in the deeper subconscious states would give you some building blocks to get there. Because I've done some hypnotherapy in the past, and
Check in with like what your state is on a daily basis. Are you like constantly kind of like looking at that or?
yeah, it sounds kind of ridiculous, but I really am, and it doesn't feel like it feels almost automatic now. But it's usually when I am in a state of so something lower on the scale of consciousness would be it starts at the very bottom. There's shame, um, there is grief, there is fear, there is desire, there's pride. There's all these different states,
Mhm.
and uh, I've done my own work to live most times outside of those. So think about it like the thermostat at home, right? My
Yeah,
thermostat's set to usually courage or above, which on the scale of consciousness, that means that you're in a state of power. Things are flowing, you're connected,
right.
you're strong. And when we're in that survival paradigm, we are in a state that's forcing. Feels like we're walking through mud is the best way that I can describe it. Things
Right.
aren't just, you're trying to force things, things aren't working right. And when I notice that in myself, I'm like, oh, okay. And then I check in, where am I on that scale? And let's say that I'm in a state of fear,
Hmm.
right? And most people think, okay, well, I'm afraid of, I don't know, whatever the case may be, of losing this client. This client's angry. I'm afraid of losing this client, which means I'll lose this revenue, which means, oh, now I don't have as much money coming in to pay my bills, blah, 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 blah. And
Yeah.
most people say, okay, well, I don't want to be afraid anymore. So I'm just not going to be afraid. And inevitably that leads them to just thinking about being afraid more, which reinforces the pattern further, deeper ingrains it as, and we could get into your work about what that does in the long-term effects. But if I noticed that I was in a state of fear, I now have this scale of consciousness to say, okay, no problem. Am I able to fully feel it?
Mm.
So now I'm not resisting it. I did go into the fear. Like, oh, okay, great. Fear. All right, it's here for a reason. And I go into it and I feel it to my full capacity. Usually that's occurring somewhere in the heart, and you're just sitting with it.
Which is hard for a lot of people. It's hard enough for people to feel other feelings, but most other feelings bring up fear in people when there are things they
Yes,
don't want to feel. And then when they already know it's fear, then it's can be even harder to sit with.
absolutely. Yeah. Someone that can sit with their feelings and emotions, I bow down to them because it's a really um it's not hard per se. Like it is
Oh.
simple in the concept, but the actual practice of it can be one of those uncomfortable things that we go through in our life.
What does that practice look like to you? This is like two different questions I always get asked is like, I'll get people that come in and are like, I really want to do the work, but I just don't understand. Like, nobody ever tells you like what the work is, which is so very true. And then the other thing is like, how on earth do you actually sit with your feelings? Like, what does that look like to sit with your feelings? And I have my own answers to this, but I'm curious, like, what is your sit with the feelings process?
So if someone's really interested in processes to actually do this, Michael Singer that we mentioned,
Hmm.
Living Untethered, and Dr. David Hawkins, the Letting Go books, he in both of those authors actually walk through their recommendations. But I'll tell you a story about me from a couple days ago, and I brought my laptop upstairs so I could kind of be around family, but I was still doing some work. And our daughter is like throwing pots and pans on the ground, and my wife was watching this YouTube video and the volume was like pretty high, and there was some like timer going off in the background from the oven. And yeah, and I
I'm already like
couldn't,
going crazy just
yeah, and I was really struggling to concentrate and to get anything done. And I felt overwhelmed and frustrated would be how I would, describe it. And I wasn't fully aware of that first. So I'm like, okay, I'm trying to do this thing. And I noticed I was trying to do the same thing like 3 times, which is making me more and more frustrated. And then the awareness kicked in. Okay, I'm feeling overwhelmed and frustrated right now. And this is like, literally what I did is I, kind of sat back from my laptop a little bit, hands on my lap, and I just felt the frustration. And, this is the part that sounds simple, but this is, the true test. And it probably took 4 or 5 minutes of I literally just sat there and I felt frustrated and overwhelmed. And I didn't think about, this sucks that I'm frustrated or this sucks that I'm overwhelmed. I welcomed those emotions in. I'm like, oh, okay, you're here for a reason. And people in these states can have these really beautiful intuitive moments where they get this guidance, where they might see a pattern of like, oh, I've been struggling to do my work for 10 years because I always work in environments that are distracting to me. Some people get, distracted easier than others. I being one of those people. And
yeah.
so I sat with it for about 4 or 5 minutes, and the best way I could describe it is the feeling just slowly dissipated. And if we look at the scale of consciousness, if I was experiencing frustration, that's a derivative of anger, right? And the next thing, if we were working through that, that might arise is pride,
Hmm.
right? So it's like, okay, like I've done a lot of this work. I can do this. I
Yeah.
can, get through this. And then courage is that we actually do something about it. So to sit with those emotions takes courage,
Yeah.
right? And but
And that's
now
like
already,
crossing over the halfway point if you're looking at the scale. If you
yeah,
and for anybody who's never seen this before, just Google like Hawkins scale of consciousness or whatever, but you'll see like that there's that kind of like dividing line between pride and courage that kind of brings you into the upper levels of things versus like the survival paradigm that's in the lower part.
absolutely. And it's a really magical moment. And another really cool thing that's happening in that moment, I believe, is not only is I'm having this shift in consciousness, but I also believe that there's some really cool nervous system work happening there, where having a young child, there's going to be screaming, yelling, things smashing on the floor,
Yep.
and that nervous system has to figure out this new level of regulation or this new level of attunement, and so I could sit there and I could feel grateful. I'm like, oh, I'm meeting a new threshold of my nervous system, and
Right.
it's like, working out a muscle. And so now instead of sitting here feeling more frustrated that I'm frustrated, I'm feeling grateful that I'm frustrated. And then
Yeah.
your emotions,
You
your
got this
energy are
like
kind of like, what?
wonderful 1-year-old doing the wonderful things that 1-year-olds do, and wonderful wife doing the things that wonderful wives do, and enjoying life, and everything's actually really good. It's just, we process it and perceive it in a different way. That was like
Yes.
the big lesson to me. Like when I had a huge shift like 7 years ago when my youngest came into the world, because I've got 4 boys. So there was a lot of that chaos all the time. And then put that on top of an ADHD brain, and there was a lot of that frustrated, kind of borderline angry, explosive sort of stuff happening because I would have to start doing something 10 different times before I would get it done, only to, try to twist that around and realize, like, oh, well, that's actually pretty normal for the amount of distraction that's going on in my life. And like give myself some grace and acceptance for, hey, I still got it done.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm sure you,
Absolutely.
I'm sure you got done whatever you set out to do too.
I did get it done, and but the really cool thing is when you're committed to using your life or your business as the container for spiritual growth, it
Mhm.
becomes less about getting the thing done and
Yeah.
more of like, wow, that was such a cool growth moment. And
Yeah,
usually
absolutely.
you say that afterwards, usually not in the moment. Uh,
It's
um,
going to be a
but
great growth moment. It's just not now.
yeah, I love growing. This is great. But I think we all have our different ways to navigate those waters. There's not just one way. Like I imagine if I was more well versed in tapping, that would have been a great moment to use tapping to
Yes.
ascend myself on that scale. Um,
Because I would have done the
yeah,
same thing that you did and just kind of sat and focused on those feelings and what they were there to bring. But I would have also been simultaneously tapping on those meridian points and maybe voicing a little bit of it. I could also do it in my head, depending on the situation, and kind of putting that focus on like, "Ugh, all this overwhelm, really frustrated. Wish these blessings weren't frustrating me and making me feel annoyed. All this, what would it take for me to, find my focus again? What would it take for me to just enjoy this moment instead of trying to be in a different one? And I would have been kind of just talking it out and neutralizing those points. So yeah, it would have been a great opportunity for that. But it's also a great
yeah,
opportunity to just focus on the feeling until it moves. I mean, I think when it comes down to it, at least in my opinion, it's about getting the feelings to move. So often we push the anger and the frustration down and then they just come visit us later in some other form. So if we can sit with it long enough that it feels welcome enough to move and exit, then great.
yeah, absolutely. And there's so much of our world, our external world, that's inviting us into the survival paradigm, right? You turn on the news or walk into a mall or, or even walk down the street and listen to what people are talking to. And this is why it's so important for us to cultivate our own methods and tools, like, to work with someone like you and learn how to tap or to go in deep into your subconscious and understand those patterns, or read these books and understand the scale of consciousness. These are all different tools in our tool belts that when we encounter these other things out in the world where someone says, "Oh my God, did you hear that the economy is going to crash?" that we don't immediately plummet into fear or desire for more money, that we can stay maybe even just in a neutrality of like, "Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that could happen, and it's happened before, and it'll happen again, and we'll probably figure it out, right?" And there's a slight optimism there. Yeah, so if I had to summarize the scale of consciousness and how it applies to someone's life path or their business, it's a very simple tool that is hard to overcomplicate when you just look at the basic emotions of like, okay, where am I and where do I want to be? And then you'll start to see this and hear this in other people, where a client will show up and they'll just say to you, "Oh, I'm just, this whole week was just so frustrating. I just, I lost it a couple times." Like, "Oh, okay, cool. Anger."
Yeah.
And I also know anger is awesome because it's so close to shifting from force to power.
Yeah.
Like
And
anger
I
is
think
actually
that's if
really,
there's anything that I think people need to realize is how powerfully good anger can be. Like,
absolutely.
I think that's one of the things, especially with working with mostly women. I think a lot of women have been kind of conditioned, like, we don't get angry, we don't get mad. It's not like how we do things. And that's kind of like programmed in. And then to realize that that's actually the pathway up to more of that joy and enlightenment and peace and everything else that we really want to feel. It's like, oh, cool. Like it's good to do this because it's getting me where I want to go. And I think a lot of people discount that or they try to skip over that and you got to get angry.
Yeah, yeah. And if people are experiencing, hardship in their business or hardship with their health or hardship in their relationships, likely one of the main culprits is a suppression of some of these quote unquote lower emotions, suppression of grief or anger or, fear and desire. And when that gets suppressed, bad things are going to happen in the long term. And so it's usually step one for people is starting to actually acknowledge and express these things and no longer suppress them. Start to be like, "Oh, okay, frustration's here. Great. Let's be the most frustrated we can be." And
Mhm.
but also staying with yourself, staying grounded, staying present, and allowing that energy. This would be something that Michael Singer talks about, that we could just let that energy out. We could just yell and scream into a pillow. And sometimes, absolutely, that's required. But the real test is allow that energy to come up and we're feeling it instead of just expressing the energy. So we're keeping the energy in here, we're feeling it, and it comes up into the heart. And that's where that alchemization can happen, where we can turn lead into gold. We can turn a lower vibration into a higher one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that it's such a beautiful journey to walk, and a tool like that scale of consciousness just gives you a very easy, like, okay, where am I? Oh, I'm forcing things. Okay, I understand why I don't feel powerful right now. Here's a clear pathway for me to take to get there.
I love that. And I love that you bring that into like the coaching container that I'm a part of. Also, I've worked with tons of different coaches for business sales things over the years. And, it often seems like they'll address mindset, but not necessarily, as you like to put it, like heart set and things like
Hmm.
that. Oftentimes it's like if things aren't working out or you're feeling like things, aren't going the way that you want them to, it's just like kind of like, okay, well, toughen up and try again. And, I very much enjoy that I can like kind of bring the vulnerability and like the stuff that, as because you work with coaches mainly, and like coaches don't like to admit that like we're having issues in the same areas that we help people.
Yes.
And we all do. Like we
Yes.
all have them. I'm sure you have them in the same areas that you help people. I have them in the areas that I help
Absolutely.
people. But that's also what makes like you great at helping people. Like that because you've been there and you've been through it. So yeah. Tell me how you feel about like mixing that in with like business coaching, sales coaching, all of that, and why you think it's so important.
Yeah. And I think, we have the name of our company as Soulful Sales. So right away when someone, comes to us or meets us, there's like, okay, there's something different here at play than just sales and marketing. And why I think it's so important to go on this journey is because it reflects the bigger shift that's happening in the world right now. So we could say from the survival paradigm into, a state of thriving. We could say from the state of victimhood into the state of freedom. We could say it's from the old world to the new world to the new earth. All these different ways to describe it. But it's clear to me that every area needs to evolve, whether it's healthcare, education, but in this case, let's talk about business. Uh, how most people found success in business previously was through a lot of fear and manipulation. That's kind of like if you look at marketing from um, 60s, 70s, 80s, and even, a lot of the stuff that happens today, that is the main, find the pain point and twist the knife. And there's nothing wrong with addressing fear in marketing. But if we live there and we amplify it for people and we don't give them a pathway to turn that fear into, freedom or love or whatever the case may be, we're not really helping people out.
No.
So if we want to be successful in business and be able to go to sleep at night with a heart that feels light, that feels free, that feels like, oh, I actually made a difference in this world, is we need to shift the ways that we show up and do commerce. And I don't think there is, a one size fits all solution for anything. But what I do think is that if we shifted the level of consciousness, even just by a couple degrees, with entrepreneurs who kind of touch everyone, right? They hire people, they sell things. If we can make entrepreneurs a little bit more conscious, the world starts to shift in a really beautiful way. And a lot of people look to entrepreneurs to say, well, hey, how should I show up in the world? Like, especially right now, oddly enough, some of the people that are talked about the most is like, I don't know, Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or, different people like this who apparently they've reached the pinnacle of entrepreneurship. And I think most wealthy entrepreneurs that we see celebrated out there are actually mostly living in a survival paradigm. And that's why we see all the time, maybe we can talk a little bit more about like celebrities here, but their marriages are, always failing or there's scandals or whatever the case may be, is because they're still trying to force their life. And yeah, maybe they've gotten some results on screen or in a bank account. But what really matters to me is helping an entrepreneur. Again, you wake up with this feeling of excitement and gratitude, and you go to bed at night with a clean heart, feeling in integrity and feeling fulfilled and satisfied. There's a little smirk that comes on your face. If I have those two things in my life, I know I'm going in the right direction. And if I can give my customers that feeling through my product or service, I know I'm helping to make the world a better place. So I'm a big fan of entrepreneurs. I think, all of us have more power to shape the world than we realize. And when we do our inner work and we approach, problems and, different scenarios from a place of courage or from understanding, from peace, real miracles start to happen instead of really living in that fear or desire space where I think most entrepreneurs have learned how to do business.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. And you're a great connector and a great creator of communities, and you kind of reference that in like even the dinners and stuff that you'd like to have on a personal level at home and things like that. How can entrepreneurs make better connections that matter in their business?
Yeah. It's I attribute if I look at all the success in my career, I attribute the vast majority of it to this one skill, to be able to connect with other people and provide value to them. And if someone is listening to this and they don't feel like they're connected to very many people, or they don't feel like their network is strong or their community is strong, I really, really recommend starting at home. So wherever you live, going out, if you live in a small town or in a city, pick a bunch of different businesses locally and just go and talk. Like if you go to a coffee shop, likely the owner of the coffee shop is there, unless you go to like a Starbucks or something. Go to a privately owned coffee shop and talk to the owner. Ask them where they're from, how their business is doing. And if you want to even take this to the next level, ask if you can interview them. Right. So if you have a business, go interview the coffee shop owner, the I don't know, the mechanic, the small boutique clothing store, and just ask them about who they are, why they have this business, how things are going for them, why they're located in, X, Y, and Z location, um, and share that as content. And what starts to happen here is you will very quickly, because people don't do this, obviously, you will very quickly be known in the community as this person that's helpful, as a connector, someone that, highlights other businesses. And imagine what, if you did this for 10 to 15 businesses. So you go and you interview them. Okay, well, now you have these 10 or 15 new friends. Let's say I'm a business coach and I'm friends with the woman that owns the coffee shop, right? And I've done something for her. I've highlighted her business and I've shared it. What she's going to likely do is she's going to share it herself in her network, right? So let's say she's got 2,500 followers on Instagram and she shares this video that we did together. Oh, cool. 2,500 people, most likely local people, just learned about me. Then everyone that walks into the coffee shop, if someone's like, oh yeah, how are things going on with my business? I'm really struggling. Hey, did you know that there's this business coach, Alexander, blah, blah, blah. So I think people overestimate how difficult it is to become one of the most well-known people in your local town or city. Um, you could start with those 10 or 15 interviews, which honestly makes fantastic content for your business in most cases.
Yeah, and then we'll
And
connect something else here, and in
yeah,
that, how would you spin that for your business? Like, because I mean, we can use me as an example. So
mhm.
I am, EFT, hypnotherapy, subconscious mind, nervous system, and then all of a sudden I'm interviewing the coffee shop owner. So how do I kind of create that flow into the new content structure?
Yeah, so if it was someone like yourself and you work with a lot of entrepreneurs, I would probably go in with the context of like, hey, I am a local entrepreneur myself, and I really care about navigating my life and my business in a mindful way. And so I'm going around and I'm talking to some local business owners and asking them, hey, how are you doing? How's your mindset? How are you feeling? How are things going in your business? And right away, that would be different than probably any way they've been approached before because you're asking them to be slightly vulnerable, right? And, I'm guessing you're in the business of vulnerability, of like, we got to get people to crack open a little bit and then the changes start to occur. Um, and so if I was sharing that content, if I was you, I said, hey, I just met Marissa. She owns this coffee shop. You have to go try their, chocolate chip cookies. They're amazing, whatever the case may be. But what's really beautiful is, Marissa was sharing the ups and downs of being a local entrepreneur and how that's been stressful for her. And also, what her plans are in the future to bring more local community into this space and blah, 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 blah. So if I was sharing this content, I really do focus on the person, right? Just like you're doing here, like you're podcasting, you're already, great at that. Um, and I would then highlight my own business or myself in some capacity. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be, large. So I'm guessing most people that are listening to this, they're not, I mean, they could be a business coach, which I think that's the easiest option. But if you're any type of coach, you can tie in whether it's health, whether it's mindset, whether it's relationships, you can apply that to the person that you're talking to. Um, and if you weren't a coach or a consultant, which again, those are the two easiest options, there's probably a way to tie in your product or service to what they're doing. Like, if I make clothing, I would go in and probably give the owner of the coffee shop one of my t-shirts and just, talk about what type of clothing he or she wears based off of living in California or Washington or whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
I
so
could leave some copies of my books.
Absolutely, right? And this, I feel like what we're talking about here is like the essence of entrepreneurship, and maybe even kind of like um, the wild entrepreneur, or the just like the go-getter. Like go out there and just talk to people. And I understand that for some people that might feel a little scary, but start with a couple people that you already have natural connections with, right? And you do. Like no one can tell me that they don't know anyone locally.
Right.
It might be someone that you was on your volleyball team, or it might be your neighbor, whatever it is. Start small, start somewhere. And um, yeah, if someone did that, just what I outlined alone, they would probably become one of the most well-known entrepreneurs within 6 months in that community. Watch what that does for your referrals. Watch what that does for your business. Watch what that does for just your spirit walking around town,
Yeah.
right? I
If you guys are
love
listening to this, this is like really, really good advice, and it's an amazing thing to implement. And I'm just gonna have to start doing it too.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun. Everywhere that I go, we live in Kelowna here, and we go for sushi, or, we stop by the podcasting studio or whatever. And I just bump into random people that I know all the time, even when we're out hiking. And there's such for me anyways, this beautiful feeling of belonging that starts to occur. And a lot of us is like, okay, like, yes, we have online businesses. We can get clients from anywhere in the world. But why not start with where you live and take that momentum and allow it to fuel your online efforts, right? So as an example, if I went and I started doing this more, I know if I took my own advice here and I did a new series and I did this, I would probably get an additional 1,000 local followers. That would result in at least 5 or 6 new paid clients. But if we look at what does that look like to someone in California or to someone in Australia, well, it looks like Alexander's profile just grew by 1,000 people. More and more people are talking about him. He's talking to more people. My online authority and validity just increased from those local experiences. So yeah, I think it's obviously like very basic business tactics. It's kind of like business 101, like get in your community and talk to people. Um,
I love
and
it.
then if you just add that little piece there, interview them and share some content around it, even just like grab your phone and just do a quick like Instagram story with someone, right? And tag them and they'll probably share it. Like it doesn't have to be overly complicated. Um, I think a lot of us get stuck in that perfectionist rut. I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna have to buy a new camera, and then well, I need like a lav mic, and like no, just do it on your phone to start, or just write an article after interview. You don't even need to do a video. Yeah, and so
I
if
think the
someone,
rut that I see is that a lot of entrepreneurs think they have to find the person that is the prospect
yeah,
instead of realizing that, things flow through connections and it does not have to be a direct route.
hmm yeah,
And
it's
that
actually
there's a
so much
lot of
easier.
good stuff that can come through that. And I think then the other limiting belief that comes with that is that I'm wasting time talking to people that are not the prospect, which is where I think people lose a lot of the value in exactly what you're promoting here and suggesting, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah, and it's easier in a lot of cases if I go right to a prospect and say, "Hey, do you want a business coach?" Okay, well, this might work, but it's a lot of times it puts people's guards up a little bit. Versus if I tell Teresa who I am, what I do, and how I do it, and then she comes across someone that is my prospect, and she says, "Oh, hey, you should talk to Alexander." That person reaches out and said, "Hey, Teresa was talking about you." That talk about that sales process, literally 1,000 times easier, and they usually become better clients as well. So this is again, why it's so important to get absolutely clear on this is what I do, this is who I do it for, this is why I do it, and you should be able to communicate these pieces of information very quickly. 30 seconds to a minute. This doesn't have to be like a polished elevator pitch, but if I just meet someone quickly, I should be able to be like, oh yeah, I'm a business coach. I do things in a slightly different way,
Sure.
energetic approach. I use, consciousness. So it's for people that, have a little bit of a more spiritual side to them. And I love working with health practitioners, and health coaches. Just in 30 seconds there, I have empowered someone to be a referral machine for me, to be a lead machine for me. And if you did that with 30, 40, 50 people don't realize this, but you can grow your business to $200,000 a year easily from referrals alone if
Yeah.
you empower people with the right information and make it easy for them to refer you.
I love it. And this is the kind of stuff, guys, that like comes like off the cuff from Alexander like all the time in our group calls and our one-on-one sessions, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I know I probably was like throwing you and Dan for all these loops last year because I was like not doing the stuff that the container was doing. I was writing a book, I was doing all these other things, but still week after week, I could come to you with whatever I had going on, even if it was a little off topic, and there was still great advice and ideas I could implement and things I could take action on like right then and there that really helped change the trajectory of my business throughout the year. So, who do you work with? How can people find you? All that good stuff. Tell us.
Yeah. So our core containers are, and this is the best way to describe who we work with, is the New Earth Health Pros and the New Earth Health Coaches. And so we love to work with people that impact the health of others. And this could be mental health, this could be physical health, this could be relational health. But yeah, we work with a lot of different health practitioners, hypnotherapists, naturopaths, gone online, fitness coaches, health coaches. And anyone that has the desire to help people in that way with this context of like, hey, we obviously have to do business in a completely different paradigm, right? So if anyone's read Eckhart Tolle's book, A New Earth, it's very much based off of that energy. So those are the people that we love to work with. Dan and I are very passionate about building community, as I mentioned, and we believe the best place to build community right now is on the platform Skool, Skool. And this was a platform that was made by Sam Ovens and recently invested in by Alex Hormozy. And if you think about,
Huge.
yeah, huge, back in 2008, 2009, if someone started to make a Facebook group and deploy that as a strategy for building community or building business, they likely became a 7 or
Wildfire.
8 figure entrepreneur. Yeah. And this feels like the same conditions right now because Alex Hormozy is kind of one of the main leading voices in marketing, especially with anyone that is a consultant, coach, or practitioner. And it's clear that since he's invested in this, he's not going to shut up about it. So the main voice of marketing and online business building right now has invested in it, and he's not going to stop talking about it for at least the next 2 years. It would probably be wise for people to investigate this. So that's the main place that we play, and we have a couple different communities there, and we even have a free one. So we have
Yep.
3 different communities. So if someone just wanted to dip their toes in, they could go and they could check out our free community, and which is the health coaches community, and then we have a an easy access community where you can get group coaching, you can get all of our courses in our software, and that's something that we're really, really proud of and we're promoting right now in relation to the Skool games that's happening. And the way that we're designing it is we're doing our absolute best to make it the best offer on the internet. So for example, if someone was building their business and they needed all these different softwares, the software that we offer people would cost them $800 to $900 a month if they went and they got it all right now. We've invested early in the software, so we're able to offer it for less. So someone could come into our container right now, get that group coaching. This is the New Earth Health Coaches, and get a complete step-by-step guide to building and scaling your business online, tech support, group coaching support from Dan Harrison and myself, community interactions, community support, and that's just going to be $400 a month right now. So this is the fun thing that we get to play around with. We also have a high ticket community and offering and mastermind, which Teresa's part of. But we honestly recommend that people start by dipping their toes in. That's the best way. We want to date before we get married. And
And they have
for
so
all,
much great stuff to dip your toes in over there, guys. So if nothing else, check out that free community and like
absolutely.
it's amazing. And this is the same software that, I'm using to build that AI bot that I was talking about on an episode a week or so ago. The behind the scenes on how I'm executing my current stuff in my business. That episode, I talk about that. This is what I'm using to do that. So, and it's all in one, super easy. And like, I am not a techie. So, between the help that I get from Alexander and Dan and my virtual assistants, I pretty much am hands off on it. But it's great. So, you guys have so much awesome stuff to offer. It really is like, I think, I mean, for me, it's the best deal out there. So,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
awesome.
and to give everyone a heads up as well, I'm also not techie. Even though I've worked in and around tech for the past 5 or 6 years. Um, but if it's things that I can navigate and use, pretty much anyone can do it. And yeah, I believe you'll probably share a link that would direct people
Absolutely.
towards that. So, if you're listening to this, look for Teresa's link. That'll be in her
I will
show
make
notes.
sure that
And
is in the show notes with all the other good information. And we keep
yeah.
throwing Dan's name around, but for anybody that wants to learn more about Dan Harrison, he'll be coming on the podcast also very soon. So he brings a little bit more of that tech side to things, and I'm sure that'll be a really awesome conversation as well.
Yeah, he's a really amazing nerd, and I say that in with the highest compliments possible when it comes to like stitching different pieces of tech together or working with numbers and financial elements. Yeah, he is, and he would probably declare this now. It's like he's a bit of a nerd, and he's awesome at it, and he also has that same heartfelt, spirit-led side as well, where I like to live more often. But I do dip my toes a little bit, once in a while in the more technical elements. But yeah, so that's kind of at a high level of who we work with, and what we're really doing is help people build a sustainable online business where they can help other people at scale, but also enjoy their lifestyle. A lot of us are parents, or desiring levels of freedom where we can travel, and not be locked in to an office somewhere. And so that's really, really important for us. That's one of our core values is freedom, and obviously these deep intimate connections with family, friends, and community. And so if we're working 40, 50, 60 hours a week, glued to our computer, that's not really too easy. So we want to try and build a business where we can hit our financial markers and be working, let's say, 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week. So yeah, that I feel like it's really important to mention, even just to verbalize for myself, just keep reinforcing that. Like, this is why we're doing it. The money's great, the impact is great, the business growth is great, but really at the end of the day, we want to be, impacting the world and spending time with our families.
There's a bigger dream and a bigger vision,
Yes.
and it's all backed by service. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much for being here today. This has been an awesome conversation. I really appreciate it. Is there anything else that you want to add before we close things up, Alexander?
I don't think so. I think, when you come into the world with Dan and myself, Soulful Sales, we have the New Earth Health Pros and the New Earth Health Coaches. We'll be talking a lot about business and some of these esoteric things as well. We'll talk about Course in Miracles. We'll do some breath work once in a while, things like that. If someone wanted to dive even deeper into these more esoteric elements, that would be probably where I'd be talking about that is on my Instagram. So that's alexander.ohm.official. And you'll see more and more, as we have structure in the business world, that will be a place where I can play a little bit more. And I love to talk about soul purpose, soul vision, and soul mission. Why we're here, why we incarnated. And so getting a little philosophical with that, and also giving people a tangible way to navigate those waters. So I'd love to connect with anyone there as well.
I love that. Yep. Fun Alexander needs a place to play too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And for all of you who are listening, thank you. I know you have a choice in what you listen to when you turn on a podcast, and I appreciate you listening to Becoming More Me.
Thanks, Teresa.
Thanks for spending some of your precious time with me today. If you loved this episode, please leave a review or simply share it with someone else who would get great benefit from it too. If you share on social media, please tag me so I can personally connect and thank you. Until next time, keep taking bold and brave steps towards becoming more of who you want to be in this world. You are capable, you are worthy, and you are enough. And if your inner critic is still trying to argue with those facts, hit me up. We've got work to do.